Hey guys, today's video is going to be all about Centramatic wheel balancers, and I'm actually going to be installing these on my Ram 3500 here. Now, if you're watching this, I would imagine that you know what Centramatics are. You've probably heard of them before at least, and so I'm not going to go into too much detail on them, but I think either way, by the end of the video, you'll have a pretty good idea of what they will accomplish. Now, I want to answer the question to start out the video, why bother with these Centramatic wheel balancers, and more specifically, why am I personally choosing to put these on my truck here? So let me back up a little bit. If you're a subscriber, you know that I recently got some new tires on my truck here. This is my 21 Ram 3500. And when I ordered it from the factory, I spec'd the Nexen all-terrain tires. Well, actually, I spec'd all-terrain tires. I didn't get a choice on the brand. But of course, Ram uses the Nexen tires on the 3500 dualies. And so I had the Nexen all-terrain tires. Really no significant complaints about the tires, but they started wearing really poorly on the front axle here. The truck has about 15,000 miles on it, and the issue is primarily an alignment issue, but either way, it was time to get some new tires. So you can see that I settled with the Falcon Wild Peak AT3Ws. Got a lot of recommendations from these on these tires from viewers, and so far I'm really happy with them. I haven't put thousands of miles on them where I can report and do a full review, so I'll plan to do that in the future. But what I noticed is, as far as the overall ride quality after putting a couple hundred miles on them, if I had to describe what the overall balance and the ride quality felt like with the old Nexens, the all-terrains that came from the factory and the way they were balanced and everything, I would say it was probably about an 8 out of 10. And I realize that's a subjective rating, but that's kind of where I'd put the factory Nexens. And then if I had to compare it so far to the Falcon Wild Peaks here, I would say maybe a 7 out of 10, so just slightly below. But I want to be really clear, the reason that I'm putting these wheel balancers on my truck is not because the Falcon Wild Peaks here ride so horribly, that they're just not balanced right, or even for that matter that the tire shop that balanced them and mounted them did a horrible job. That is not the reason here that I'm putting these on the truck. I think a lot of it has to do with, the more you learn about a particular topic, in this case trucks, and the more you learn about ride quality, you start to want to improve the ride quality and kind of take it to that next level. And so I think I'm at the point where I want to explore options and see what I can do to enhance the overall ride quality here on the truck. Now, almost a year ago, I did a separate build video on my truck explaining why I ordered these specific options here when I ordered it from the factory. And then I've done a couple follow-up videos since then, and I've had a lot of viewers recommend and suggest these Centramatic wheel balancers. And at the time, I really wasn't that familiar with them, didn't know a lot about them, so I looked into them and just wasn't really impressed, didn't really think that they would benefit me a lot. And I think some of the reservations I had primarily was the cost. This is, for a set on a dually like this, it's about $400. And so I just wasn't sure that that was worth it at the time. But then I also had reservations about the visual because, as you know, they mount behind your wheels here. And so you do see a little bit of them through the holes. Now, these come from Centramatic, not painted black here. So you can see I've painted up mine black because I want to mitigate and kind of hide how they look. I don't want them to stand out. But from the factory, they come just plain raw metal, silver, and from a distance they do stand out, especially on the front tires. So that was certainly a reservation, just the visual on them. And then maybe I had some reservations about the sound because they do have little beads in them, and you can hear that as they rotate at slower speeds, 20 to 30 miles per hour. You're going to hear a little bit of that as those beads begin to settle. So I just wasn't sure if I was up for all those different aspects at the time. But I think I'm at the point now where I'm ready to improve the ride quality here on my dually. And so even though I had those reservations at the time, I'm willing to explore and see and, kind of fine tune basically the ride quality and improve the overall balance. Now, a few things that I really like about these Centramatic wheel wheel balancers, at least in concept or theory, are first off that you're not balancing just the individual tires alone. You're balancing the entire assembly. And so if something outside your tires is a little bit off balance, then these will address that problem. I also like that, as your tires age and you put several thousand miles on them, maybe they change a little bit. And so maybe that one static weight that's on the outside here isn't quite in the perfect spot a couple thousand miles from now. And so rather than having to go back to the tire shop and get everything rebalanced, these wheel weights are essentially dynamically balancing your ride every single time you take it out, no matter if there's a rock or something stuck in the tire or something else that has changed since the last ride. So I really like that also. And then, I guess overall, I think I just have more confidence in the whole setup being balanced, the way these work, with the weights inside the rings as you take off and get up to speed, compared to having just a static wheel weight on your tire rim here. And speaking of which, I had a lot of comments in my last video I did when I showcased the tires that I put on my truck. I had a lot of comments from people saying, hey, you've got wheel weights on the outside of your rim. What's up with that? Why didn't they put them on the inside of your rim? I think some people even said, hey, that's kind of a rookie job by the installer. And actually, I'll just point out that at present, half my tires have weights on the outside, and then the other half have the weights on the inside. But get this is kind of interesting. When I got this truck from the factory back in 21, all of the tires all the way around had the wheel weights on the outside, meaning from the factory, from the Ram factory, when the original Nexens were balanced and mounted on the tires, on the rims, they all put the weights on the outside of the tires. So I found that kind of interesting. I just got kind of used to it, didn't really think a whole lot about it until people started pointing it out and wondering, why didn't I ask them to put the weights on the inside of the truck? So I did a little bit of research on that because it kind of got me curious too. Most modern cars, have adhesive weights that go on the inside of the rims, so you don't really see them at all anymore. But here on dualies, they do have a ring on the outside of the rim, and so you can put clip-on weights like that. So I did a little bit of research, called around and spoke to a lot of different tire shops because I was curious, can you ask a tire shop, hey, I only want my weights on the inside of the rims, not showing? Or does the computer system that balances the tire dictate where they need to put that weight? So again, I'm not a tire expert, but in talking to different tire people, it sounds like most tire shops, when they're using their balancing equipment, they're going to be told either, hey, you need to put the weight on the outside or the inside of the rim if you're not using adhesive weights. And so you don't really have the option to choose. Most tire shops anyway, most systems, that seems to be the case. So I asked, well, what if I don't want weights on the outside? Are there any other alternatives? And the consensus I got was, yeah, they can try to put the weights on the inside, but depending on the tire, especially if you've got a more aggressive, all-terrain tire where it's heavier and there's more tread, it may not be perfectly balanced if they just put the weight on the inside. I mean, some tires, you got to have a weight on the outside and the inside. So anyway, I wanted to mention that as follow-up to some of the comments and questions I got in my last video on the tires. And I want to thank everybody for pointing that out with the weights too, by the way, because I 100% agree. I mean, I think it looks a lot better without the wheel weights on the outside. In fact, this front tire, you can see the wheel weight is on the inside, and I think it looks a lot better. So thanks everybody for pointing that out. But really, that kind of segues into the next set of questions that I want to answer, and that is, once you decide that you're going to put Centramatics on your truck, there's really two questions I think you got to work through, or at least two questions that I had to work through. And the first one is, do you then leave those wheel weights on your tires, on your rims, or do you take them off? When I had these tires balanced and mounted, they put these wheel weights on. So now that I'm doing the Centramatics, should I leave the wheel weights on all the tires, or should I take them off? And so some of the points of consideration that kind of helped me work through that process were, first off, am I confident that the tire shop that put these on, am I confident that these wheel weights are in the exact precise location they need to be, that they're the exact amount of weight, or is it possible they're a little bit off? So that was something I considered. Then of course the appearance, do I like having some of the wheel weights on the inside, some on the outside? Do I like that aspect of it? What about, how severe could the balance be overall when you've got all-terrain tires that are a little bit more aggressive, a little bit heavier with the tread? How severe could that balance balance be? And maybe if you've got even bigger tires than I've got here, maybe that plays a role into whether you leave that wheel weight on or take it off. But really, I guess the final straw in my case that helped me decide all this is a couple weeks ago, I found this in my driveway. And yes, that is a wheel weight that surprisingly, not only did it fall off one of the tires, but it actually fell off in my driveway out of all places. I found it laying around, which is pretty odd. I would think a wheel weight, if it's going to fall off, it's going to fall off when you're going at high speeds. But that was kind of the final straw for me. And so my decision here, I'm going to be taking the wheel weights off all of the outer rims, the front tires, and then the outer rims on the back dually tires. However, initially I'm going to leave the wheel weights on for the inner tire inside here on the dually. I'm going to leave them on. Now I might take them off later, but for now I'm going to leave those inner wheel weights on that inside tire. But again, I'm going to be taking all the wheel weights off of the outer tires, both on the back and of course on the front here. So that's what I'm going to do. I mean, worst case, if I don't like it and I don't think it rides smoothly, I can always have those tires rebalanced. But you know, I think there's more than enough weight inside these front ones and rear ones to compensate for the little weights that are on the outside rings here. And then really the only other question I found myself answering was, do I want to paint these up black or leave them as is, you know, silver from the factory? And like I mentioned before, that was kind of one of my reservations getting these, is that you are going to see them slightly through the holes on your rims there. They probably disappear more on the back here, but I think you would definitely see them on the front through the holes. And I really didn't want to see something silver inside those holes. And so I opted to paint them up black. This was about 3.5, 4 coats almost of paint. I opted for a satin finish. You know, I didn't want something that was flat that would be hard to keep clean, but I also didn't want something too glossy. So I went with satin. And you can see it turned out pretty nice actually here. And I don't think you're gonna see them much. You'll probably see a little bit still in the front if you come up close, but from a distance, I don't think you're gonna see much. But as soon as I get them installed, I'll give you all some close-up views so you can kind of get an idea and decide what you think is best in your case. All right, well, enough yapping. Let me set up the camera and I'll let you watch in as I get these installed. But for those curious on the part numbers here that I needed to get, you can see on the front there, it's part number 400424. And then on the rears, it is 400425. And it's my understanding that these are the same for the Ford F350 dualies, but the manufacturer's got a really helpful chart on their website so you can make sure that you get the right part. And then as far as the tools that I'm going to be using, it's really simple. You just need a good solid jack, an impact wrench with a 7/8 socket for the lugs, and then of course a torque wrench. We're going to be torquing to 140 pounds. Now if you don't have a torque wrench, you can just borrow a friend or maybe a significant other that weighs 140 pounds, have them sit on the other end, and you should be just fine. Guys, check out the clearances on here. You can see we got plenty of room, nothing at all in the way whatsoever. Okay, so I got them all installed, and I gotta say that went a lot smoother than I thought it would. I thought surely I'd encounter some kind of hiccup along the way, but I had plenty of clearance both on the rear and the front. It took probably about 5 minutes or so per tire, so about 20 minutes in total there. And I am really glad that I painted them, because as you can see in the video, you can barely see them. I mean, I see just a little bit of a ring through the holes on the front here. Go a little bit closer so you can see that. But yeah, I mean, that painting them black really helps blend in. I think unless someone pointed them out to you, I don't think you would notice with them painted up black like that. They really blend in very nicely there on the front. That was kind of my biggest concern, how they would look there. On the back, I mean, you really can't even tell. They blend right in. They're kind of in the shadows there. Come a little bit closer so you can see what that looks like. And you probably saw there are cutouts for the inner valve stem, and they're plenty big. I got plenty of room to be able to use my little extender, my little valve extender here, and grab a hold of that inner cap. You know, one of my biggest pet peeves when you take your truck somewhere, your dually, I've even had this happen at the dealer, is when they mount this outer tire, install it, they don't line up the holes so that you can get to that inner valve. You know, they're kind of off center. So always make sure that you line that up. I like to have the valve stems opposite. So I'll keep my outer one here and then opposite up there. But I got plenty of room. You know, I was a little concerned about how that cutout would look, but I got plenty of room to get this up in there, to unscrew it. And then with my kind of extended chuck, I can fill up that inner tire, no problems whatsoever. But I mean, you don't see anything here. It just blends right in to the shadows. And here on the opposite, the passenger side, now it's pretty cloudy today, but this is more the side that the sun is hitting. So I'll give you some close-up views here on the back. And you know, really painting it black like that, it just really blends into the shadows. In fact, speaking of which, I've got black rims here, but let's say you just had aluminum finished rims that weren't painted. I think I would still paint the Centramatics black, because it just really helps them disappear kind of into the shadows. You can see there, you really, I don't think, unless someone pointed them out, I would notice them in there. Of course, I've got the same slot for my valve stem as the other side, plenty of room to get to it. But yeah, they turned out really nice there. I'll give you a look at the front here, some different angles as you're coming up kind of parallel to the tire. You can make out the flat part of the Centramatic that's perpendicular to the assembly, you know, but being painted black, it just looks like it's part of the tire and wheel assembly in there. Really turned out nice here. You know, I think really what'll give it away that I've got Centramatics is not the visual, but probably just the sound that it makes when I'm starting out, you know, under 20 or 30 miles per hour. And I'm going to try to give you a sampling of that here in just a moment. Okay, so I'm taking it out for a quick test drive, and I want to give you an idea of the sound, what it sounds like inside the cab, both with the windows down, the windows up, show you what it sounds like from outside the truck. And so to start with, I'm going to come to a complete stop here and open both the driver and the passenger windows here. All right, so coming to a complete stop right at 0 miles per hour. All right, and then we're going to take off. Okay, so right at 19 miles per hour, that's when I noticed the sound went away. Really, really mild. Let's go ahead and do the same thing, but roll the windows up and see if I can make it out at all. But it seems like 19 miles per hour on that first run at least is when they settled, and I no longer heard them at all. All right, so we're gonna come to a complete stop again here. All right, 0 miles per hour, got the windows up. Yeah, I can't even hear them at all like that. I mean, I think there's probably so much noise canceling in the cab here, and it's so quiet that I didn't even hear, I think, the slightest bit of swishing at all. But now let me take the camera, put it on the outside of the truck, and do the same thing, go from 0 up to about 30-40 miles per hour and see what you think. Okay, so hopefully that gives you an idea of what the Centramatic wheel balancers sound like as you're getting up to speed. So in summary, you start hearing the swishing sound right at about 2 to 3 miles per hour, all the way up to, for me, 19 miles per hour, just like clockwork. It seemed to stop every time. If the windows are up, didn't hear a thing. If the windows are down, that's when you hear it, of course. I mean, I could see if you're driving through a parking lot that people might kind of turn their heads and look because they're hearing a sound that just is a little bit different and unusual. It's almost like maybe tall grass, you know, kind of swishing in the wind. I could see where to some people it might sound like air's being let out of your tires, maybe. So, I mean, I think definitely people might turn their heads in a parking lot and wonder, what is that sound? But if they solve the problem, if they, you know, perfectly balance the front and the rear and everything is just as smooth as butter, then the noise that they make, I think, is a very minor, you know, nuance compared to the benefits that you'd get with the system. Now, as far as what it feels like, initial impressions, I'm just gonna say it feels different so far. And you'll have to check back with me later for the full review. Well, all right, I hope you found this information helpful, especially if you're in the market for Centramatics on your truck. Of course, if you have any questions on them, feel free to drop me a comment below and I'll do my best to answer them. I am going to wait before doing a full review and giving my impressions on the Centramatics because I want to put, you know, at least 1,000 miles on the truck, you know, towing at highway speeds and such before I really offer a full review and give them a thumbs up or a thumbs down, especially with me taking off the wheel weights, you know, on the outer tires on the back and in the front as well there. You know, was that a mistake or not? So if you're not subscribed already, hit that subscribe button. But as always, thanks for watching.